I am going to open this one on a grey October morning in the year 1847, in the outer yard of a working mill on the edge of Haverford, Ontario, at the precise moment a young man made the most consequential error of his professional life. And, as it happened, the luckiest one, though it would be the better part of 3 weeks before he understood that, and a great deal of humiliation in between. Come, sit with me a moment. I have a fire going, and this story is one worth hearing properly. His name was Mr. Callum Baird. He was 32 years old, newly appointed as a valuation agent for a firm of commercial solicitors in York, and he had ridden out from the city that morning with an attaché case across his knee and a set of very firm opinions about what he would find. A small, probably mismanaged textile mill that a recently deceased owner had left to a widow who would be entirely out of her depth, and who would, in all likelihood, be grateful to sell. He had the paperwork prepared, he had the offer drafted, he had in short decided the outcome of the day before he had even crossed the threshold. I have known men like Mr. Baird, perhaps you have too. The mill itself surprised him a little. It was larger than the file suggested, 3 stories of solid limestone, windows running the full length of the upper floors, a wheel turning steadily in the mill race that ran along the north side. The yard was swept, the loading bay was organized. Whatever he had expected from a widow who had inherited a business she had not built, this was not it. He revised his estimate upward slightly and made a note. He came through the gate into the outer yard and found a woman crouched beside the main drive shaft housing, her hair pinned back under a plain linen cap, her jacket exchanged for a heavy canvas work apron that was dark at the hem with machine oil. She had a wrench in one hand and was frowning that connected the wheel to the first floor looms. She did not look up when he came in. The sound of the water wheel covered his footsteps. Mr. Baird looked at her for a moment. Then he looked around for someone else. There was no one else. "Excuse me," he said, raising his voice over the wheel. She looked up. She had dark eyes, a smear of grease along her left cheekbone, and the expression of a person interrupted mid-thought. "Yes," she said. "I am looking for Miss Lennox," he said. "Miss Maren Lennox. I have an appointment." She held his gaze for a moment. Then she said, "She is expected shortly. Is there somewhere I can direct you to wait?" He nodded, satisfied. "The office, if you please. I'll be wanting to look over the accounts in any case." "The accounts," she repeated in a tone he did not particularly notice. She rose from her crouch, pulled a rag from her apron pocket, wiped her hands, and led him across the yard and up the exterior stair to the second floor, where a door opened onto a narrow corridor, and then a clean, well-ordered office with a desk and 2 chairs and a row of ledger books along the wall, so numerous and so precisely labelled that Mr. Baird actually stopped and looked at them. "Miss Lennox keeps good records," he observed. "She does," the woman agreed. He set his case on the desk and looked at her. "You may go," he said. "Not unkindly, the way you dismiss someone whose function has been served." She looked at him for just a moment too long. Then she said, "I'll let Miss Lennox know you're here," and left. "Now, I want you to hold that moment, my friends, because everything that follows turns on what happened inside it." Mr. Callum Baird sat down at the desk of Miss Maren Lennox and opened his attaché case and spread out his papers, and he did not once consider, not even briefly, that the woman who had just shown him out of her own yard and up the stairs to her own office and been told that she may go, was the woman he had come to see. He simply had not considered it. She was in work clothes. She had a wrench. She was crouched in the yard. And so, Miss Maren Lennox, for her part, stood outside her own office door for a moment with her hand on the frame, and she made a decision. She did not go back in. She went back down the stairs, crossed the yard, crouched beside the drive shaft coupling again, and finished what she had been doing. She had been managing this mill for 4 years by then. She had taken it over when her father died. Not her husband, mind you, but her father, who had built it from a single loom in a rented room in 1819 and expanded it, with her assistance, into what it was now. She had kept the accounts since she was 16. She had negotiated the wool contracts since she was 20. She had, in the 2 years before her father's health declined, been running the thing almost entirely on her own, while he was well enough to stand in the doorway and pretend to supervise. She had inherited it outright. It was hers, in the most complete and legal sense, and she had also, in 4 years of owning it openly, watched a remarkable number of men arrive at the gate, look around the yard, look at her, and look past her for the person actually in charge. The first few times it had flustered her, then it had offended her, then gradually it had become something else, a kind of test she ran without announcing it, watching how long it took, watching what a man revealed, when he thought no one of consequence was listening. She had, by this point, a fairly comprehensive theory about the character of men who came to her mill, based entirely on what they said and did in the yard before they understood who she was. Mr. Baird, she decided, finishing with the coupling, was going to be interesting. She was not wrong. She took her time. She went upstairs to the small room at the end of the corridor, her private office, not the presentation one where she had left him, and she washed her hands and changed her jacket and unpinned her cap and put her hair into the kind of arrangement that cost her no particular effort, but apparently cost certain men their composure, and then she walked back down the corridor and knocked on her own office door. "Come," he said. She opened the door and found him sitting at her desk with her papers fanned out in front of him and a small frown of concentration on his face. And she thought, "He has been going through my ledgers." She stepped inside and said, "Mr. Baird." "I am Miss Lennox." He looked at her. He looked back at the door, presumably for the woman who had shown him in. Then he looked at her again. The color, she noted with some satisfaction, came up quite quickly. "Miss Lennox," he said, standing, knocking 2 of his own papers onto the floor, not picking them up. "Yes, good morning. I am Callum Baird, of Baird and Whitcomb." "I know," she said. "We had a correspondence." He retrieved his papers. She took the chair across the desk from him, rather than behind it, which she had found over the years was more useful. It let the other person flounder in the unfamiliar seat and gave her the advantage of perfect composure. I was just reviewing." He gestured at the ledgers. "I noticed," she said pleasantly. "What have you found so far?" Pause. Significant pause. The kind that means a man is resorting everything he has thought since he arrived. "I had begun with the 1845 accounts," he said finally. "The margins are, I confess, Miss Lennox, the margins are stronger than I anticipated, than you were led to expect from the file, you mean." He looked at her steadily. He was, she observed, not unintelligent. He had the sense to understand now that something had gone wrong with his assumptions, even if he was still working out the precise shape of it. "I may have come in with certain expectations," he said. "Most men do," she said, "when they come here." He was quiet for a moment. Outside, the wheel turned. Upstairs, the looms ran. She could hear them through the ceiling. That particular rhythm she had fallen asleep to as a child, and had woken to every morning for the last 4 years, the rhythm that meant the mill was running, the workers were at their stations, the contracts were being met. "The woman in the yard," he said carefully, "when I arrived. She told me you would be." "She told you I was expected shortly," Miss Lennox said. She did not say anything that was untrue. There was a silence, then Mr. Baird made a sound that was very nearly a laugh, though he suppressed it quickly. He looked down at the desk, he looked back up at her. "I told her she could go," he said. "You did," said Miss Lennox. "I was in her own office." "You were," said Miss Lennox. "Stay with me, my friends. This is the part of the story that matters, because here is what Mr. Callum Baird did next, and I want you to understand that this is not the thing most men did." Most men at this juncture doubled down. They found a way to make it her problem. Too informal, shouldn't have let the confusion persist, should have said something. They became brisk, professional, slightly cold, and proceeded to the business at hand as if none of it had happened. A few had walked out entirely, which had told her everything she needed to know about them. Mr. Baird set down his pen, put his hands flat on the desk, and said, "Miss Lennox, I owe you an apology." She waited. "I arrived here with a prepared asminest," he said. It was based on a file that was, I now see, quite inadequate. I assumed from the file and from what I saw in the yard that this business was in a certain state, and I was wrong about that. And I was condescending to someone in her own workplace, which I should not have been regardless of who she was. He paused. I am sorry. She looked at him for a long moment. She had a standard she applied to apologies, based on years of receiving inadequate ones. An apology that was really an explanation was not an apology. An apology that required acknowledgement from the injured party requires you to say it's all right to release the person from their discomfort, was not an apology either. An apology that stood on its own, that did not perform, that said the true thing and then stopped, that was worth something. She said, "Thank you, Mr. Baird." And then, because she was Maren Lennox, and she had been running this mill since she was 24, and she had very little patience left for a morning wasted, she said, "Now, shall we actually look at the accounts?" He blinked. Then he nodded. Then he moved around to her side of the desk, because she had risen and gone to the ledger wall and pulled down the 1844 volume and opened it on the reading stand with the ease of someone who had done it 10,000 times. And they stood, side by side, and she walked him through the numbers. And he asked questions, and she answered them. And somewhere in the second hour of this, Mr. Baird stopped making notes in the margin and started actually listening. This is the thing about Miss Maren Lennox, you see. When she explained something, she explained it the way her father had taught her to explain it, from the ground up. Not from the conclusion backward, not from the desired answer forward. She showed him how the wool cost affected the margin before she showed him the margin. She showed him how the maintenance schedule affected the downtime before she showed him the output figures. She built the picture the way you build a wall, and when the wall was finished, you could see exactly what it was holding up. By noon, Mr. Baird had abandoned his draft offer entirely. It was still in his attaché case. He had not mentioned it once. They stopped for the midday break that the mill bell announced, and Miss Lennox's housekeeper brought a tray to the office with tea and bread and cold meat, because Miss Lennox took her noon meal in the office on working days, which most of her visitors found surprising, and she had long since stopped adjusting the habit for visitors. Mr. Baird ate the bread and drank the tea and said, "May I ask you something, Miss Lennox?" "You may," she said. "Your father built this mill." "He did. But you have been managing it for how long?" "Before he died," she considered. "In practice, since I was about 22. On paper, since he died." He was quiet for a moment. He stopped. "He did not leave it to a male relative," she said. "No, he had no sons. He had me, and I was the one who kept the accounts. He trusted you." "He knew me," she said, which was not quite the same thing, and which she said without emphasis, but which he heard anyway, because he looked at her with an expression she did not quite know what to do with. "Miss Lennox," he said, after a moment, "I am going to tell you what my firm actually wanted me to come here and do today, because I think you should know." And then he told her. He told her about the draft offer in his case. He told her about the expectations his partners had sent him with. The estimate. The condescension baked into the very phrasing of the brief. He told her that he had arrived intending to present a figure considerably below what the mill was worth, on the assumption that a woman managing an estate alone would not know the difference. She listened without expression. "And do you still intend to present that offer?" she said when he had finished. "No," he said. "Why not?" He met her eyes. "Because it would be dishonest," he said. "And because even if it weren't dishonest, it would be stupid, Miss Lennox. These are some of the best-kept accounts I have seen in 5 years of this work. The mill is worth what it is worth. Anything else would be an insult to the books alone." She looked at him for a moment, then she said, "You know that telling me this makes it quite impossible to do business with your firm." He nodded slowly. "I know, your partners will not be pleased. I know that too." There was a pause. Outside, the mill bell rang the return from the noon break, and upstairs the looms started up again, with their familiar weighted rhythm. My friends, I want you to sit with that for just a moment. A man who had arrived at her door that morning with a prepared condescension and a discounted offer had, by the noon bell, told her exactly what he had meant to do to her and then refused to do it. Not because she had caught him, not because the numbers had exposed him, but because he had decided, somewhere in those 2 hours of ledger books, that she deserved the truth more than he deserved the easy transaction. That is a rarer thing than it ought to be. Miss Lennox stood up and went to the window that overlooked the yard. She watched the workers cross back to the building below. She had known every one of them since childhood. The mill was not just hers in the way that a possession is yours. It was hers the way that a responsibility is yours, which is entirely different and considerably more demanding. "Mr. Baird," she said, turning round, "what does your firm actually charge for a proper valuation? An honest one, done for the purposes of the owner knowing what she has, rather than for the purposes of a purchaser knowing what he can get away with offering." He named a figure. "I would like to commission one," she said. "From you, not from your firm, if that distinction can be made cleanly. I have been intending to seek independent valuation for some time. I have simply not found anyone I thought would do it honestly." She heard him set down his teacup. "Miss Lennox," he said, "I should mention that, given the morning, I am not sure you have sufficient reason to trust my honesty." She turned from the window. "On the contrary," she said, "you have given me more reason to trust it than most men give me in a year of dealings. You told me the thing you did not have to tell me. That is the only test that matters. If you are still with me, my friends, and I hope you are because we are nearly at the end of this now, I want to tell you what happened in the weeks that followed, and then I want to tell you the part that makes me smile every time I think of it." Mr. Baird came back the following Thursday with a proper assessment kit and no prepared conclusions, and he spent 3 days going through every corner of that mill the way it deserved to be gone through. He asked questions that no one had asked her in 4 years of ownership. He asked what she wanted to do with it, not what she intended to sell it for, and the unmistaked to know about its current state in order to make decisions about its future. He treated the exercise the way she had always believed it should be treated, as information gathered for the benefit of the person who would live with the answers, not for the benefit of the person who would pocket the commission. On the 3rd day, in the late afternoon, they were in the yard again, and she was showing him the new coupling she had fitted, the one she had been crouched over when he arrived, and she was explaining how the alignment problem had been causing wear on the secondary shaft. And he was listening the way he listened, which was with his whole attention and without interruption. And she finished her explanation and looked up and found him watching her with that expression again. "What?" she said. "Nothing," he said. "Only, on the morning I arrived, I told you to go. You told a woman in a work apron to go," she said. "You had the information that you, were a person and were in a yard and had done nothing to warrant being dismissed." She considered this. "That is a rather high standard," she said. "It seems to me," he said, "to be the only standard that makes sense." She looked at him for a moment. The wheel was turning. The late afternoon light was coming in at the angle it came in at this time of year, long and golden across the top of the stone wall. If you are wondering, my dear friends of Moonlight at Bellwood, whether this story ends where you think it ends, it does. Though it took another 7 months and a considerable amount of stubbornness on both sides, because Miss Lennox had been managing her own affairs for 4 years without assistance and did not intend to stop, and Mr. Baird had a professional reputation to rebuild from the direction of honesty rather than convenience. And those 2 projects turned out, in practice, to be entirely compatible. If you have sat with me through this whole hour, I am grateful. You were good company at the other end. I will tell you the final thing, because it pleases me to tell it. In the years that followed, Miss Lennox, Mrs. Baird, by then, though she kept the mill under her own name because it was her father's name and she had earned it, found that a certain type of man continued to arrive at the gate and look past her for the person in charge. She had stopped being offended by it. She kept her work apron on a hook by the yard door, and she put it on when she heard horses, and she watched what a man did with the first 5 minutes, and she knew what she needed to know. The ones worth keeping, she found, figured it out on their own. They looked at the yard, and they looked at the ledgers she pointed them toward, and they looked at her, and something rearranged itself behind their eyes. Those were the ones she did business with. And Mr. Baird, who had arrived one grey October morning with a discounted offer and a set of very firm opinions, and left 3 days later with an honest valuation and the uneasy suspicion that he had met the most competent person he was ever likely to encounter, was the first of them, and the one she kept longest, and that is, in the end, all the accounting that matters.